Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so happy that you guys could join us today. Welcome to our webinar. This is how to raise confident, resilient, and emotionally healthy children in a broken world. My name's Kim Driscoll, and I'm going to be your host today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we, the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation, are a provincial entity. We acknowledge that we carry out the work on traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik titles and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We, the staff and members of the board, pay respect to the elders, past and present, and descendants of this land. We honor the knowledge keepers and seek their guidance as we strive to develop closer relationships with the Indigenous people in New Brunswick. As an organization focused on vulnerable children in the care system, we express these words with both humility and hope. Today, our goal is going to be to discuss, as parents and caregivers, how can we raise children in a way that increases our children's odds of being able to thrive in life and change the world for the better in our homes and outside our homes. And I'm very excited to have Sarah Moore here with us to help us understand this topic a bit more. Before we dive into our discussion, though, about this, I just want to take a moment to remind everyone about our network and upcoming programming. The New Brunswick Adoption Foundation is a nonprofit organization that aims to promote and advocate for children in the permanent care of the province. Our vision is that every child or youth in the permanent care of the province finds a permanent family. Some upcoming programming I just want to take a moment to mention is tomorrow, July 9th, we have French Building Families. Thursday, July 11th, we have late night talks. And then we also have a webinar on July 23rd that's focused on nurturing self esteem in our children. A couple of housekeeping items that we want to make sure that you get the most out of this presentation. So I encourage everyone to switch to speaker view. This way you can focus on a presenter. We love engagement here. So please use the chat feature throughout the presentation. If you don't know where the chat is, you're going to go to the three little dots at the bottom of your screen and you can look over to the left normally and you'll see the word chat. So you can put your questions in there. Again, we love engagement. Sarah loves engagement. So we will be pausing periodically throughout the presentation in order for you to ask questions. Now we will be stopping the recording at the end of her presentation and putting up a 4-question small poll while we get ready to go into our Q&A that's not recorded. So there will be time to ask questions at the end also. You can also use the raise the hand button on your screen. And if you're interested in following on live Facebook, go ahead and ask your questions there as well. At the end, we'll be so excited to see what questions you've come up with, and we'll be all prepared for it. So I would like to now let Sarah introduce herself, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Kim. I'm truly excited to be here today. I value the work that you do, and frankly, I am touched that your community chooses to come to an event like this because it inspires me and gives me hope, not only as a professional who does this work, but also as a real life parent. So I love knowing that people are investing the time and energy to do this work because it's really easy to get focused on all the other things on our to-do list. So if you are here and watching this, just know that I arrive with incredible gratitude in my heart. So a little bit about me, as some of you may know, I am the founder of Dandelion Seeds Positive Parenting. I am the author of Peaceful Discipline, which you see way back there behind me. I am a certified parenting coach, and I work with parents and caregivers all around the world. I am the board chair for the American Society for the Positive Care of Children. I have training in everything from child development to trauma recovery to obviously the parenting space and how to support sensitive children. I also have training in improv comedy. And I spent probably 20 years in corporate America working on negotiation, which little did I know at the time would be exactly what I needed for parenting. And above and beyond all of that, I am a real life parent doing this work alongside you. So it's one thing to have the head knowledge, it's another to be in it day to day, and I am definitely in it day to day with you. So one thing I just want to throw out there up front is, and this is not in any way, shape, or form meant to be a sales pitch, my intent is gratitude. If somebody is here and interested in my coaching program, feel free to contact me and I will offer you a discount that I offer, only to people who I speak with directly and who are truly engaged in things like this. So let me know if you're interested and I can send you more information about that. But before we even get started into the details of how to raise confident, resilient, and emotionally healthy children in a broken world, because we can all agree the world's a little wonky right now, if I were to put it very lightly. But I just want to touch base and ask us all to just be mindful of our bodies and what we are bringing into this discussion right now, what we are bringing into our day. I don't know about you, but when I transition into a meeting like this, part of my brain is still, did I switch the laundry? Part of my brain is saying, what else is on my to-do list? I need to finish that conversation I started with somebody else. I'm kind of all over the place because that's how we are as humans. So I'm going to invite all of us. And by the way, I will refer to people as parents in this webinar. That being said, I am fully aware that that is just my shorthand for educators, all sorts of caregivers that may be out there. So if you hear me saying parents, it's just because it's frankly too long to include every possibility of, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whoever, every time. So I say that with full awareness that we have all sorts of people here, and I'm thankful for everyone who is invested in the well-being of children. But back to what I was saying, if you feel called to do this, just do a quick body scan if that feels accessible to you. And if it helps you to close your eyes, feel free. I am closing my eyes because it helps me be a little bit more present and paying attention to my body versus how bright the room is or anything like that. And just notice anywhere that you may be holding tension in your body. And rather than pushing back on that tension, just say with gratitude, thank you, tension, for showing me that I'm holding on to something that isn't serving me right now. It's here just to give me information that perhaps I have some stress in my body. So stress, thank you for showing up and telling me that you're needing something. I'm aware of you and I acknowledge you. And as I travel from head slowly down to my toes, I'm doing something really beautiful in my body, and I hope you are as well. I am noticing, first and foremost, that I have more of a body than I perhaps realized as I was looking at you and talking to you and thinking about this webinar. I am more grounded. I am aware that I have a whole entire system here that is working to keep me alive and well today. So I am noticing my breathing slowing down a little bit. I'm making sure that my exhale is longer than my inhale. And when I feel called to do it, I am going to slowly open my eyes and just come back to this present moment. And again, say thank you for being here, especially when we talk about things like broken world and how to do some of the healing work. It's really easy to get emotionally flooded. And that sends us into fight or flight mode, which is the opposite of where we want to be when we're focusing on healing. So I wanted to begin with just checking in and doing that quick little body scan. Notice, by the way, that I did not focus a whole lot on breathing. Some people say breathing exercises are their go-to, and that's fantastic. I'm happy for them. And yet, for some people, particularly people who have a history of trauma, deep breathing exercises can actually trigger a trauma response in the body and send somebody into fight or flight. So if you are somebody out there who says, I start to hyperventilate, I feel more tension when I try breathing exercises, it's wonderful that you have that information about yourself. Don't do the breathing exercises. They are not a one size fits all. So I'm starting with that little tidbit of nervous system regulation information for you because there are so many people out there who tout the benefits of deep breathing when it may actually not serve you one bit until you do some other healing work as well. So I will get into some of the other things that we can do at various points as we go through our webinar today, but I wanted to start there just because, again, unfortunately, as we talk about these topics, sometimes they can be triggering for people. And if something like the body scan, which, although again, there's never a one size fits all, but generally speaking, body scans are less threatening to the traumatized nervous system than the breathing exercises. So I wanted to give you a tool that you can use anywhere. You're always going to have your body with you, and including in today's discussion, if you feel that something is not landing right in your body or something's bringing up a memory or whatever it might be, that you have a tool right away to get you started on feeling a little bit more peaceful in your body. So that aside, or perhaps I should say that with us, because the focus is presence here, let's talk a little bit about the brokenness of the world. We have to know what's wrong before we can learn how to fix it. If I simply take my car to the mechanic and say, I don't know, figure it out, that's going to cost me a whole lot more time and money than if I say, it's making a rattling sound, or I have a flat tire, or whatever it is. The more specific I can be about what's broken, the more intentional I can be about finding the right solutions for it. Now, that being said, I do realize that number one, we are not vehicles. And number two, we have, frankly, a whole smorgasbord of things that are kind of broken in the world right now. We have things that are happening right here and now. There are wars, there are famines, there are all sorts of things that people are experiencing today. There is abuse, there's all sorts of tough stuff happening right now. We also have with us systemic problems, institutional problems. We know that people have been victimized and harmed through certain educational systems. We know that certain doctrines can be harmful for people. We know that there are all sorts of organizations that have done a whole lot of harm in the world, and some of us might be carrying that. So it's very important to acknowledge that as well. We have our own cultural traumas that we have been through. We have ancestral traumas. We have intergenerational, tied in with ancestral traumas, that oftentimes we don't even necessarily know that we are carrying. We just know that we're reactive. And of course, in the next 45 minutes or so, it would be physically impossible for me to go through each one of these and say, here's exactly what you do with this one versus that one. But the good news is the tips that I share with you today are going to be applicable to virtually all of them, to the extent that we are all individually just one person that can have a beautiful ripple effect into the world around us. Whatever we are carrying is how we will behave. Whatever we are feeling is how we will react. However we are experiencing the world is going to be the lens through which we see the world. So I'm going to share another, just a very quick personal tip that I sometimes find useful for myself as a human being and as a parent, knowing that all of this trauma is out there. And even just sharing those examples of things, I don't know about you who are listening, but in my body, I feel more anxious than before I said any one of those things out loud. That is a message to me to say, I'm carrying some of that. I'm dealing with some of that on a daily basis. So what I can do is a couple of things. First of all, if anybody visualizes out there, this is a quick little visualization. You can kind of picture it. Perhaps you've been in a museum or something where you've seen an interactive exhibit that does this. But if you can picture your body, just, look around the room, this is where you are right now. Now, just for a second, kind of zoom out, if you can imagine seeing that. Look at your room, the same room that you're in, as if you're looking down on the room. You see yourself sitting, drinking your tea, whatever it is you're doing. Take it a step further. Go outside and look down on the building that you're in right now. And keep going until the point where you see teeny tiny planet Earth. And just remember that there is a whole universe, literally a whole entire universe of perspective that reminds us that everything that has ever existed in time, everything that has ever existed in your specific life, how's that for an extreme? The whole universe to your specific life has still enabled you to be here in this moment, alive, doing the work, and in a position to create positive change. You personally have survived. Your ancestors survived. You have survived to the point where anything is possible. And even though all of these awful things have happened in the world, even although all of these really tricky things are happening here and now, everything has been for your good to the extent, and I don't mean that from the standpoint of, you're fine. That's not at all what I'm saying. Everything that has happened has still somehow enabled you to be the one who wakes up in the morning and says, I can do something about this because I managed to make it through to this moment. So when we talk about resilience and raising resilient children, I'll get into that shortly, but I wanted to start with just remembering that look at the power and look at the place that you specifically have in this world to affect positive change. It's like dropping a pebble in the ocean, ripple effect, right? That is you. You are this beautiful pebble that is designed to influence others in wonderfully positive ways. Let's talk a little bit about the specific things that we can do, knowing, okay, great, I'm a pebble. I came to a webinar, Sarah called me a pebble. What in the world do I do with this now? Well, good news, you're not just a pebble, you're a pebble with a nervous system and with interpersonal connections and all of these things. And particularly as parents and caregivers, I am going to ask you a basic question just to kind of check in with yourself. And if you feel called to do this, feel free to, write in the chat whatever comes up for you. But I'm going to ask you to wait until I finish the full description before you do it. Full description is I'm going to ask you how you are. Sounds pretty easy, sounds pretty straightforward. I'm, that lady in the grocery store who smiles as you walk past and says, how's your day going? And odds are good that we have all experienced this. And what do we typically say? I'm fine, how are you? Right? Maybe we're actually fine, but fine in my world is pretty much a non-word. It holds no value. It's like, fine it's nice, but make it fine and something, maybe I'm fine and energetic. Maybe I'm fine and kind of tired. Maybe I'm fine as in I feel capable of doing things, but am I more happy, sad, full of rage? I could be all sorts of things, still getting by, and the getting by is what I'm going to call fine. But at any given moment, every single one of us has a whole lot of emotions in our body, which, by the way, we are supposed to have. Every single emotion makes sense, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I am going to tell you what, right now, I am not just that lady in the grocery store who wants to know how you're doing. I am your authentic inner voice who's asking you the question, how am I doing really with the wink, right? Like the real deal. I want your authentic answer. How are you feeling right now? And if anybody feels called to give your authentic answer in the chat, feel free to do that. And I will keep talking for a moment just for illustrative purposes. I will share that it's still morning for me where I am right now. I know it's afternoon for you, so you've probably had a little bit more, time in your day. Thank you, Claudia, for adding slightly anxious but grateful too. Yeah, that's super real. Anxious. Anxiety is a real thing. Let's go ahead and name that. Thank you for naming it. I too am feeling kind of anxious this morning. We have a ridiculous couple of weeks coming up in my personal life. Like, it does not make sense. My to-do list just for today is not humanly possible. It's just not. I have more people to call than there are hours. I have more tasks to get done than there are moments to get them done. And yet, I think I started the call with a whole lot of gratitude. I'm feeling grateful to be able to talk to you. I'm feeling grateful for my health because a couple of weeks ago, I was sick as a dog, and the fact that I feel good physically today, that's great. There are things that I'm super thankful for, but it doesn't make my to-do list any lighter. So it's this balance of not getting myself into such a tizzy that I make myself sick again. That's not the goal, right? So yeah, exhausted and anxious, so real, right there with you. I don't know if Zoom is picking it up, but I have dark circles down to my knees today. I feel that one. So wherever you are, my friends, in what you are feeling, first thing I want to say to you is you make sense. There's nothing broken about you. There is this narrative around the world, and particularly in our culture, that we are supposed to be highly productive, we are supposed to be happy, right? Anybody ever heard that? Oh, you're supposed to be happy. Anything other than productive and happy is somehow flawed, and we should minimize or squash that down as much as possible. That's actually false. That's the last thing in the world that your body needs. So simply acknowledging that you make sense is incredibly validating to the nervous system. I am going to quote Dr. Daniel J. Siegel probably multiple times throughout our conversation today, but he says, along with Tina Payne Bryson, who's his co-author on a whole bunch of books, and they're both just fantastic human beings. I know them personally, but some of you may know their work as parenting writers and neuroscientists and whatnot. Neuroscientists and whatnot, people say that all the time, right? Anyway, heal it to feel it is one of their basic sayings. I like how catchy that is, heal it to feel it. And I'm sorry, I said that completely backwards. Feel it to heal it. That's what I meant to say. Feel it to heal it. We have to feel our emotions in order to heal them. That means that there are times where it makes perfect sense to feel uncomfortable because we're supposed to be uncomfortable. In that discomfort, we get information about what it is that we need in order to achieve emotional equilibrium again. The goal is not happiness, as nice as that sounds. The goal is actually emotional equilibrium, to live within what I call the window of tolerance. I can handle this. Whatever comes up, I'll deal with it. That's actually the healthiest place to be. Now, if you can sprinkle in, I don't know if anybody likes cupcakes here, but if you can add sprinkles of happiness, all the better. If you can add actual cupcakes, some people will say better still. But the goal is not just to be happy. The goal is to feel empowered. The goal is to feel capable. But there is nothing wrong with not feeling that way sometimes, because otherwise, if we spend too much time just focusing on feeling happy and squashing down the other stuff, that bubbles out in a couple of ways. Number one is physical manifestations of stress. That's where we sometimes find ourselves sick, like I did a couple of weeks ago. Another thing that can happen is just like if I were to take a giant, plunger, there's a lovely image for you, a giant plunger of sorts, and put it inside a volcano and say, you stay down there, magma. I don't want anything to do with you. Your emotions are too big for me. And I'm pumping and pumping with the plunger inside the volcano, again, visuals are everything, right? If I am pumping and pumping inside this volcano, eventually what's going to happen? The whole thing is going to explode, right? It's going to be a colossal mess. I don't even want to picture that analogy any further. But here's what happens as parents and caregivers. We have to be able to identify, circling back to why I asked you how you are, we have to identify what it is that we are feeling, knowing that our parenting is going to reflect what it is that we are feeling on the inside. So before anybody says, oh no, I felt anxious or exhausted and anxious, that means I'm going to be a terrible parent. False. That's not what I'm saying. What it means is what a gift it is for you to be aware of what you're feeling. Because again, feel it to heal it. When you let yourself feel it, you automatically lower your stress level because you're naming it. You're acknowledging this is real for me. And I don't need to talk myself out of my reality. And when we are consciously aware of what we are bringing to the parenting table, so to speak, we are automatically more mindful of it. I know that I'm tired today. Actually, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Remind me if I don't say it, but there's something important that I said. I want to make an important distinction there. I know that I'm feeling tired today. Therefore, odds are good that I might have a shorter temper with my child. Odds are good that I might have less capacity to get stuff done. But having this information can make me more intentional about doing some things to balance that and be more peaceful. If I don't acknowledge it, if I just try to brush it off to the side, I'm much more likely to be reactive and explosive. And then later today say, I wonder why I feel like such a crummy parent today. And that doesn't serve anybody. Furthermore, I can go to my child, and you can do this with kids of all ages. You can do it with an infant, even though they might not completely understand the words that you are saying. You can do it with an older child, a teenager, someone, an adult child, if you're so inclined. But you can say things like, hey, I want to let you know I'm feeling tired today, so I'm going to work to be peaceful. I'm going to be intentional about doing some things that help me feel rested and empowered to show up for you in ways that feel good to both of us. So when I do that, it's more top of mind. And when it's more top of mind, I'm more likely to follow through. Now, the important distinction that I didn't want to forget, notice how I said, I am tired. I am more reactive. I am, etc., etc. I'm actually going to shift that a little bit. Here is a minor shift. And if you're taking notes, I encourage you to write this down. When you hear yourself saying, I am anything, add a word. I am feeling whatever it is. Because when I say I am, my brain says, oh, you just gave me a permanent description that I am supposed to assign myself so that I can meet up to your expectations. So if I say, I'm angry today, which I'm not. But if I were to say I'm angry, my body says, all right, you're an angry person. And at a subconscious level, my body will work to make that true. Whereas if I add that small word, feeling, I am feeling angry right now, my body says, oh, that's a temporary thing. Feelings are like waves, they wash over us, nothing's permanent, and it doesn't become part of my subconscious identity. So anytime we go into a parenting situation, and by the way, all of this will directly relate to raising confident, resilient, emotionally healthy children. This is all setting the stage, and you'll see how it all ties together. But when I'm aware of how I'm feeling, I can know that my best parenting has to start with me, not with how my children are behaving, not with anything that's happening externally. Statistics show that 80%, It's a stunning number. 80% of our responses to other people have to do with how we are feeling and what we are bringing to the table emotionally. So let's say, for example, that this afternoon, it's going to be a really hot afternoon where I live here in Colorado, USA, and we go outside, my daughter and me, and let's say that I am feeling grouchy. I'm feeling tired, I'm feeling overwhelmed, my to-do list is huge, I'm feeling grouchy. And let's say that she's, playing with a sprinkler or something to try to cool off. And to be funny, she sprinkles me. And next thing you know, I am all wet. If I am in that grouchy place, yeah, it suddenly doesn't end so well, right? Whereas, let's say that this afternoon, I am feeling energetic, I'm feeling playful, I'm feeling lighthearted, and she gets me with the sprinkler, odds are good that I'll be stunned for a moment, but I'll probably respond playfully. I'll probably respond from a place of, "Ooh, you're on, child," and next thing you know, we're having fun together. But 80% of my response has nothing to do with the child in front of me and everything to do with how I'm feeling in that moment. So my invitation to all of you, especially if you're feeling anything that, causes you anxiety or inner strife, whatever it might be, just be aware of it, because your simple awareness can be enough for you to acknowledge your desire to be intentional around having a peaceful interaction with the children in your lives. So with that, I also encourage you, I'm going to take it one step further in the basic "how are you" question. Think about something you're thankful for. Think about some part of your body that doesn't hurt. My left pinky finger is in good shape today. I'm going to celebrate my left pinky finger. Think about something that you did well anytime at all in your life. Doesn't even have to be today. But when we tend to focus on the positive, I'm not talking at all about toxic positivity. Toxic positivity would be, well, my house might actually be on fire, but everything's fine. Everything's fine. I don't need help. That's toxic positivity. And thankfully, my house is not on fire. When we focus on gratitude, when we allow mental and emotional space for things that are going well, I promised you more than one Dan Siegel quote. Here's another one. Where our attention goes, neural pathways flow. That one's not quite as clean as feel it to heal it. But essentially what he means by that is what we focus on grows. If we focus on gratitude, our gratitude grows. If we focus on the stress, our stress tends to grow. It doesn't mean that we don't honor our stress. It doesn't mean that we don't pay attention to our struggles. Obviously, I just said, feel it to heal it. You have to feel it. But it's a balance just to make sure that we are not spiraling down into a negativity bias, which, by the way, all humans have something called a negativity bias. Otherwise, the human race wouldn't be here anymore. That basically means that I have to assume there's trouble in the world. Otherwise, what happens? I walk across the street without looking both ways. I walk into a cave without assuming there's a bear in there. All of these things are what have kept the human race alive. But when I focus only on the potential bear in the cave, I lose sight of the fact that there's life outside the cave as well. So to the extent that I can be mindful of where I focus my time and attention is more likely to grow, that can help me model for my children. And this is where I will start to transition into specifically confidence, resilience, and emotional health for children. I talked about our feelings, we're modeling for our kids how to do these things. this also is going to be parent-centric insofar as we need to model confidence, resilience, and emotional health for our kids to have a chance at them. Again, though, I don't want to worry anybody. If somebody here in the audience is like, my confidence has always suffered and it's not great now, am I dooming my child to have low confidence? Not at all. Because the point is, figure out those areas of things that you can do well. I don't care how terrible you are at cooking. If you have some amazing dance moves, you've got some amazing dance moves, right? There is something that everybody can do. I don't care how small it is. And it doesn't even have to be something you do. It can be, your way of thinking. It can be you have a beautiful smile. It can be whatever it is that you own. You've got this thing. Everybody on the planet has something. So to the extent that you can highlight that and really lean into that to model your gratitude for yourself and trust in your own abilities, knowing that brains are amazing. We have something called neuroplasticity, which basically means it's never too late to learn new things. So even if some of the things I talk about today, including confidence, are not your forte, you can absolutely grow in these areas by practicing them. It's literally never too late. So let's talk specifically about raising confident kids. I know you have another webinar coming up about kids with high self-esteem, and that's fantastic. My guess is that we will have some overlap here. However, raising confident kids often starts in our approach to parenting insofar as the more peaceful we can be with our children, the less our children need to live in fear. Because when our children live in fear of how we're going to react, whether they're going to get punished, whatever it is, the more time they spend in fear, the more time they spend literally in fight or flight mode. And somebody in fight or flight has a really hard time feeling confident because they're just in survival mode. So our job is to say, how much emotional safety can I create for my child? Because emotional safety is the root of self-confidence. It's I feel safe enough that I can learn and grow. I feel safe enough as a child that I can push back on my adult without fear of retribution or punishment. I feel safe enough that I can make mistakes. If I feel safe enough making mistakes, I feel safe enough to try again the next time. I'm combining confidence and confidence and resilience, just to the extent that, frankly, emotional safety is the root of all good things with children. But I'm actually going to pause for a second. I realized I've been speaking for a long time and I haven't paused for reflections. Is this landing? Am I going too quickly, too slowly? Anybody having anything come up in your mind? I'm going to zip it for a second, see if anybody wants to ask or share anything before I continue on my verbal journey here.
Well, as someone may be typing, I'd like to definitely iterate here that it's definitely landing with me. And I don't know how often anyone can tell that I'm like, I look up when I'm really being introspective or like, oh, look, Claudia's saying a lot of aha moments. It's landing with exclamation marks. That's the way I feel. It's like you're putting my thoughts into words that make sense to me and that are relatable to me. So I love it's actually bringing like clarity to it. So I'm like, yeah, that makes absolute sense. So I keep looking to the side because it's like I'm taking it in and I'm remembering the situation that you're, saying that could have related to. So it's landing for me and for Claudia too. So
Oh,
yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim and Claudia. I appreciate that feedback. And if there's anybody out there who's like, good for them, but I'm lost, that's okay too. Again, all your feelings make sense, and I welcome follow-up questions. By the way, I'm super accessible if you ever want to message me directly. You can do that on my socials or email or whatever. I welcome human interaction. So, for what it's worth, I know touched very briefly a couple of times here on emotional safety and being a peaceful place for our children rather than a reactive place for our children. Okay, how? Right? I want to be peaceful. We all agree, like that sounds like a very worthy goal, but concept versus action, when I have the child who just did the thing that is my trigger every single time, how do I actually translate that to real life? So, and I see another comment. Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. I see that and I appreciate it. What does it actually look like in practice? Because we can all agree that we want to be peaceful, but sometimes the application of it in the moment can be very tricky. So I'm actually going to share my screen here in a second, and I'm going to give you an acronym because we all love acronyms, right? Okay, maybe not, but this is a quick and easy one that I hope you can, remember. I'm happy to email you this little refrigerator sheet if you want to have a copy of it. Let me know and I'm happy to send it out. I realized that maybe we can do a play along at home. I know we have some Francophone French speakers here as well, and I should have come up with a French version. I too speak French, so I could have done that. The acronym itself is HUG, H-U-G. So hopefully something that is easy enough to remember. And I'll have to think of câlin, some sort of French similar version here. But let me go ahead and share my screen about what the HUG process is. Quick sneak preview. It is the acronym that you can keep in mind to help regulate your body when you are tempted to be reactive, i.e. less than peaceful to your child. So here it is. And hopefully everybody can see that okay. And the H stands for hold your reaction. Pause and ground yourself. Ask, how do I want my child to see me responding? Quick little bit of brain science for you. We have, and I talk about this in Peaceful Discipline, my book, we have approximately 6 seconds. That's all, 6 seconds between an input from an external source and how we either react or respond to it. Now, it's an average. There are some things that we react or respond to very quickly. Other times we have a little bit more, but on average, we have about 6 seconds, which is actually a fairly long time to pause and do something else to hold our reaction. So what does that look like? Here are a couple of sensory calming techniques that we can use to help self-regulate when we are tempted to be reactive. No coincidence, I call it the hug process. One thing you can do is literally give yourself a big squeezy hug. It might sound a little bit silly, but what actually happens is in the nervous system is I'm mimicking the safety of being in the womb. I am literally down regulating my nervous system by creating this tight little, network of nerve responses in my body saying I'm safe in here. Another thing that I can do, as we did at the beginning of this call, is a quick little body scan. I might close my eyes, I might check in with my body. If I pray or meditate, I could consider doing one of those things with my 6 seconds. I could also do something, this is one of my favorites to use, simply look somewhere else. I'll tell you why. All right, let's pretend that a couple of generations ago, I was living out in a field with my family members. Maybe we had tents or something like that that we lived in. And if I wake up in the morning, do my big stretch, walk out of my tent, and all of a sudden I see something large approaching, if I want to stay alive, odds are good that I need to stare at it for at least a short period of time to figure out, is that as much of a threat as I think it is? so that I can make a plan accordingly. Do I need to fight it? Do I need to go back in my tent? Do I need to start screaming and warning everybody else? But I need to maintain my line of sight on that thing coming across the field to determine whether or not I am safe. Now, let's say that it was just a small stampeding herd of butterflies, no actual threat, right? Everything is safe, everything is fine. First thing I'd probably do, and by the way, obviously butterflies don't stampede, but there's my improv practice coming up, trying to figure out what's the most benign thing I can think of coming across the field. So first thing I would probably do is actually decide subconsciously, I can move my gaze. I don't have to stare at the butterflies. I can go look at the tree, I can look at the stream, I can look at the berries on the bush next to me, I can look at my family, whatever it is, I move my gaze. Now, the human nervous system has not evolved very much insofar as if I am in what seems to be a threatening interaction with a child or with another adult for that matter, my nervous system is going to say maintain eye contact, focus on the threat. But if I can remind myself in those 6 seconds, look somewhere else, look at the other wall, look down at my feet, look outside, maybe even go outside if I can. All of those things signal to my body from the subconscious on up, not a threat, I can handle this. I don't have to be in fight or flight mode. So try it the next time you're arguing with anybody, just look around. And odds are good that you will instantly feel a greater sense of peace in your body as opposed to engaging in that fight or flight two-way interaction there. Next here, we've got understand their perspective. That's what the U stands for. What's happening beneath the surface? As Dr. Ross Green says, all behavior is communication. And virtually none of our kids wake up in the morning and say, oh, it's Thursday. It's the day I ruin people's days. Fantastic. Nobody does that. So if a child is acting out, it's because they have some sort of an unmet need for connection, for food, for water, for emotional safety, whatever it might be. That's what's driving their behavior, not malicious intent. Even children who are traumatized, who have been through horrible things in their life, are not simply acting out for the sake of trying to rile up other people. If they are acting out, it is their nervous system speaking out, saying, I don't know how else to communicate this unmet need that I have. Will you please show up for me peacefully? Because what my body actually needs right now is more safety. Because the safer I feel at the most fundamental level, the more emotionally regulated I am likely to be. And this is true for all humans, and especially for people who have experienced trauma. Last but not least, the G is give them grace to be human. Just like all of us, kids are doing the very best they can with the physical and emotional resources they have at that exact moment. Development isn't linear and their brains are still growing every day. One of my biggest pet peeves in the parenting world is when I hear somebody say, well, they knew that they weren't supposed to treat the dog that way yesterday, so they are willfully choosing to treat the dog that way today. No, probably not. Odds are good that they had more resources yesterday. Maybe they were better nourished. Maybe they had more sleep. Maybe they had a less overstimulating day. All sorts of possibilities. But again, going back to that Ross Green quote, with all behavior is communication, you know what? Yesterday, I had capacity to make dinner. I had the time and the energy to do it. The day before that, we got home way too late. I was too stressed. It was order in pizza night. The same concept applies for children. Just because they could do the thing yesterday doesn't mean they can do the thing today. And we need to take that narrative off the table when it comes to parenting. By the way, on page 2 here, if this resonates with anybody, just know that almost all of our triggers as parents are predictable. There are very few times when, woo, that hit me out of left field. I had no idea I'd have a big reaction to that. Usually our triggers are predictable. They are often very similar to triggers related to our own upbringing and our family of origin. That could be a whole other webinar for another day, but this can help you keep in mind, this is what you're bringing to the table. This is where we can understand our child's perspective, the you, and then what can I do to be more peaceful in that moment? So this, frankly, is where a lot of the confidence and resilience comes from for our children. And that when we meet them with this grace, that's where they develop the confidence to say, I can handle hard things because I know that my adult is a soft place to land. If I make a mistake, in fact, if I even do something that's directly offensive to my parent or caregiver, I still know I'm not going to be in trouble because they're going to see that it's not them versus me, it's them and me against the problem we're trying to solve. The problem is external to us. And to the extent that we can prioritize connection and create that emotional safety for our children, that gives them the space and the grace to be very, very human. That's where their confidence can grow. That's where their resilience can grow. It's not about keeping kids so incredibly comfortable all the time that we're not exposing them to the real world, so to speak. And I put that in air quotes. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But it's about figuring out, how can I make sure that my child feels so emotionally supported that they feel brave enough to try those new things. That's where the resilience really comes from. But it's not pushing them so outside their comfort zone that they feel scared and actually damage our attachment and our connection with them. Forcing independence too early, although it might look like kids are more capable and resilient, it actually sometimes shows kids, well, my adult isn't there for me anyway, so I might as well not go to them for help. So it can look good on paper, especially in the early years, but you actually do want your children to be as dependent as they want to be, with gentle, supportive nudges within their window of tolerance to create the most resilient children. Because these are the kids who, when they trust you're going to be their soft place to land no matter what, have the bravery to go out and try new things. I'm going to touch briefly on emotionally healthy children. And I'm kind of going to circle back to the beginning of what I was saying a little while ago about how are you feeling right now? You've got to communicate that to your kids in age appropriate and developmentally appropriate ways. And Claudia, I'll make sure to address your question here shortly. Thank you for sending that. What that can look like. In fact, I'm going to start with those of us who maybe didn't have a lot of emotional intelligence modeled to us, because frankly, we grew up, generally speaking, by a generation of parents who was fine. They handled the stuff, but there was often disconnect there. Maybe a lot of us grew up in homes where there wasn't a whole lot of peaceful discipline. You know, discipline meant to punish. Discipline does not mean to punish, it means to teach. I'm going to say that right up front. Peaceful discipline, name of my book, is about peaceful teaching. It is not peaceful punishment. So that's a huge paradigm shift generationally that I'm seeing, but to discipline means to teach. And when we can remember that creating that emotional safety is the key to everything else, that's where we want to focus. But again, back to what I was saying about, if we didn't have it modeled for us, how can we do it? Sometimes we're not even aware of how we're feeling. Sometimes we have trouble being in touch with our emotions. I'm going to invite everybody right now, and you don't need to put this in the chat because it could get awkward, but just notice your body right now. Are you feeling thirsty? Are you hungry? Maybe you need to use the restroom. Do you have any aches or pains? You know, whatever, just notice your physical state. I'm thirsty. I'm going to honor my thirst by getting a sip of water. Starting with our fundamental physical needs, noticing them and following through on them is the first step. It's the foundation for noticing what we're feeling emotionally and being able to talk about those things. So our kids might give us the side eye if we're not used to interacting in this way, but you can practice saying things like, I'm thirsty, I'm gonna get myself a glass of water. Maybe by next week, you can say, I'm feeling kind of tired, I'm gonna go to bed early tonight. Maybe by week 3, you can say things like, I'm feeling a little bit sad about that conversation we had with grandma yesterday. Here's what I'm going to do to help rectify that situation. Here's what I'm going to do to help create more peace in my body. Might not be 3 weeks. This is not a beautiful 3-week plan. I don't sell that, right? But the more we can tiptoe into naming our own feelings, but not stopping there. It's important for our kids to hear what the emotions are, but also tell our kids, what are you going to do about them? And it doesn't mean model how to put them down with the plunger and the volcano like I talked about. It's not about how to feel better. It's about, you know what? I'm sad about that. I'm feeling sad. Notice that feeling word again. I'm feeling sad about that conversation I had with grandma. I am going to call her because I'm wondering if maybe she's struggling with it too. And I value a close relationship with her. So I'm going to see if we can work through the problem together. But the more you model the specific things you're going to do to take care of yourself, the more you raise children who say, I've seen this emotion before, I can identify it, I'm not afraid of it because it's familiar to me, and I know what to do with it. This is a child who grows up into an adult who doesn't feel the need to binge watch whatever show anytime they start to feel sad because they're trying to escape. This becomes the child who doesn't need to get violent every time they feel angry, or hopefully anytime they feel angry, because we modeled for them going for a run instead, or doing whatever our process is, our healthy choice for dealing with our emotions. But the more we can model the whole enchilada, so to speak, not just the happy feelings, I feel happy, let's have a celebration. I feel angry. You know what? It's okay to feel angry. My anger is telling me that I have a problem with this, that, or the other thing. That's actually really good information for me to have because then I can make some changes in my life. Thank you, anger, for showing up. And I know that spending time in nature helps me feel more peaceful. So I'm going to take my anger outside. I'm not going to try to push it away, but I'm going to go for a walk because walking helps me process the anger in a way that does no harm. Or whatever your thing is. But the more you can model that to your children and frankly practice it for yourself, the stronger you and your children can be, because then no emotion is off limits, nothing is scary. And when we raise children who have that emotional health, when we raise children who are deeply familiar with what it feels like to be respected and valued and confident and resilient, children who won't stand for the maltreatment of themselves or others because they didn't experience it firsthand, we have children who can go out and create that beautiful ripple effect that I talked about a little while ago, the pebble in the ocean. And we have a whole generation of people who are saying, you know, odds are really good that the world isn't going to be completely fixed in a single generation. But if we can be that much closer to healing, because we have that many more children who have more tools, who have a broader skill set than perhaps we had. If we will stand our ground when somebody says, oh, just punish that kid. squash that behavior. When we are brave enough to say, actually, no, I'm not going to do that, and stand up for our children and follow through peacefully, it doesn't mean that we don't guide our children. To discipline does mean to teach. It doesn't mean to walk away and pretend things aren't happening. But when we can teach in ways that do no harm, physically, spiritually, emotionally, whole body approach, you have children who make the world substantially less broken, starting from the inside out. So that is how we heal the world, my friends. And I'm so glad that we've spent some time here today. I see Claudia's question. Thank you for saying you love this parenting technique. I really appreciate that. What if you're co-parenting with someone who doesn't have the same parenting technique? That's called welcome to co-parenting. You represent virtually every person on the planet in that situation. So you are in very good company. And I hear you. Whether you are co-parenting within the same household as the co-parent or not in the same household with the co-parent, a couple of things come to mind. One is, I have good news for you. It takes exactly one adult in that child's life who is modeling these things and doing these things for the child to receive all of the benefits. So your co-parent doesn't have to be completely on board with you, because your child can learn, I feel safer with this person because they are modeling safety to me. And more than likely, this is going to be the child who opens up to you more. This is going to be the child who runs to you rather than away from you when they do something that they shouldn't have done or what have you. That being said, can we change our co-parent? Absolutely not. If I had a magic wand, I would say co-parents agree, it doesn't work that way. But what we can do is, as much as possible, simply model it with compassion, with grace, with knowing that just, human nature, it's really tempting to get up on our soapbox and say, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I'm going to lecture you on all the ways you're parenting wrong. Very quick way for people to tune out and say, I don't want to hear why I'm wrong. I want to be understood. I'm not saying we always understand our co-parent, but to the extent that we could say things like, I see that this is hard for you. Is there anything I can do to help? I know this isn't how you were raised, so it feels really unfamiliar to you. I can listen. And above and beyond anything else, just live it and know that you absolutely are that pebble in the water. It is impossible to drop a pebble in the water and have it not make ripples. Know that your ripples matter. And even if you don't see the changes ever, or even for a good long time, you are still influencing other people. And you never know what indirect way that person might end up feeling change, even if you aren't the one to have the direct effect on them. You are so welcome, Claudia. Thank you for that really good question. I really appreciate it. You're definitely not alone. And now I'm
Love
gonna
your analogy. Sorry.
I'm gonna open it up. So thank you. Go ahead, Kim.
I was just gonna say, I love your analogy of the ripple effect. Like, I love it because some people don't see it right away, right? And then they worry, but then you happen to see your child, help a child up from the road because they fell and hurt their knee, and you see that's what I do for them. But I didn't think they were going to do that. Or look, they learned from that. So it's not always right away.